Hey, what's going on, guys? Bit of a video here today with Luke versus Tarkin, and we are going to have myself playing Cunning Tarkin. So this is a Tarkin deck trying to take advantage of cards like the ISB agent, Bosk, stuff like that. I was inspired to make this because the ISB agent seems really good with Tarkin, with the ability to potentially ping somebody off, and then you additionally have the experience counter you can give him. So that seems like a great turn one play. And my opponent is playing Command Luke, very solid deck, and we will see how this goes. So I'm resourcing here with the intent of having Colonel Yularen into resupply into Callus and or Bosk, depending on how that ends up looking. So that's like a pretty solid plan for the first three turns, and we'll see what my opponent does. Ends up being a restored arc, pretty basic card. I'm gonna throw down Yularen, and my opponent will still have the arc there, 2 cost 2/3 with restore one of my favorite units. Yularen, 2 cost 2/3. When you play a command unit, including himself, you repair one from your base. So actually pretty similar units in some ways. Both of them 2 cost 2/3s that have some repairs they can do over the course of a game. And I'm gonna resource a card there, and I have a maximum firepower now, which is definitely something that I want to see. And we're gonna see how this continues. Jrod's gonna lead us off with a resupply. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. So resupply, very simple card. Put this event into play as a resource. So in my hand here, I still have Callus, I still have Bosk, I still have the max firepower. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be on 5 resources. I can play one of my ambush guys. Here we also have our 2/3s are probably going to swing at one another's base. Arguably, my opponent could pass here in the hopes that I attack first, and then he gets to benefit from his restore. But it's probably better just to take the attack immediately because if you pass, and I could first off just immediately take the initiative, but even if I don't, if we both end up attacking, I end up with the initiative at the end of it. And yeah, you get the one restore, but I think it's probably more worth it to just go ahead and I think it's probably more worth it in that situation to just go ahead and take the swing. At this point, I actually had to step away briefly in order to resolve something going on with a food delivery I had that had arrived early. So that's why we aren't having any immediate movement or whatever. But just some general thoughts on this matchup. So Luke is kind of a mid-range deck. He has a lot of like just really good efficient plays that he can make, especially in like the mid game. He's not the most aggressive deck. He's not the best late game, but he has a lot of like just pretty efficient moves. Because he's blue, he has access to the best removal. And Command Luke here is a deck that has a little bit better late game. So normally if someone's playing Command Luke, they're probably playing Home One as a top end to the deck. That's an 8 cost ship that can be very powerful. You're probably playing resupply also. In this case, definitely playing resupply because we've actually seen the resupply being used. Um, and so the resupply is potentially quite relevant. And then if that can get stuff out faster, you can deploy Luke sooner, you can get to your powerful stuff more quickly. The other big endgame piece the deck is probably playing is the new Jedi Luke, the 7 cost unit who is 6/7, I think restore 3. And when you play him, he does -3/-3 to an enemy unit and -6/-6 instead if you have had a friendly unit defeated this turn. So Jedi Luke, very nice kind of trick unit in that it removes something when you play it. Also, the -X/-X can sometimes be a lot of value. However, it ultimately isn't the best in terms of like sustained huge power. So it's kind of interesting when you compare it to something like Han Solo, the unit. So Han Solo, the 6/6 with ambush, and he has like a permanent shoot first effect on him. And so Han Han and Luke both probably kill one thing when you deploy them. Han is a little bit better afterwards because his shoot first effect is permanent, so he can keep taking down enemy units very efficiently. But Luke has better stats. He's 6'7" instead of strength 6'6". He does have Restore 3, and he also has both he is Force, Jedi, and Rebel and Force are both traits that have very relevant synergy in the game right now. Whereas Han is, I think, Underworld, which is not something that actually does anything in the game right now. So overall, I would say that the two are pretty similar in terms of both being 7 cost. So that's Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, and Han Solo, Reluctant Hero. Both are kind of 7 cost units that take out an enemy when played and then remain on the field as a powerful body. Han is has that permanent shoot first, which makes him more efficient in continuing to fight enemy units. Luke has a little bit better stats, better traits, and does have restore as well. So it's an interesting scenario there. Luke, of course, also synergizes with Luke's lightsaber. But anyway, so he has some good like 7 and 8 cost top of the curve stuff. My hope with this is that I can get to the late game where my heavy ships will be able to hopefully get the advantage. But and in the early game, I might also have an advantage depending on what exactly he's playing. But in the mid game, I feel like this Luke build is going to have a substantial advantage. And honestly, in the early game, Tarkin can do really well, but it kind of relies on specific things that you might not always see. So we indeed have both units attack. On the next turn, my opponent leads off by having the restored arc attack. I'm going to deploy Tarkin. So my hope here is to be ready to defeat Luke when Luke deploys. That's kind of my goal. My opponent sends in Kanan here with the Energy Conversion Lab, ambushing Colonel Yularen and defeating him in one attack. Mills off the top card, which is an overwhelming barrage, and that repairs the base. Um, I am going to. So this is kind of awkward. So Tarkin cannot defeat Kanan in one hit. I could ambush in Callus, but Callus would himself be defeated. I could ambush in Bosk, but Bosk isn't Imperial, so that's much worse for setting up the maximum firepower that I want to do. I could play out this trooper, but that's not necessarily that good. It would be the only thing I could play. So ideally, what I want to do is have Callus defeat Kanan. But what I decide is that I'm going to have to use Jeddah City here to give Kanan -4 attack. So now Kanan is a 0/5, and that means I'm going to be able to ambush in Callus, defeat Kanan, and not take any damage in return. So I draw a card and get Callus on the board. That's something that feels very strong to me. Then I can attack the enemy base with Tarkin, give Callus an experience, and now I am ready to defeat Luke when he deploys. I can either surprise strike him with Callus, or I can play the maximum firepower. Um, my opponent hits my base here for 2, restoring 1 to his own base. This restored arc getting some good value here. It's done 6 damage and 3 repairs. That's a pretty good result for a unit that you played on the first turn. And not dead yet. Could still keep going for some time. So I'm sort of thinking here about how to structure my turn so that I can try to answer Luke when he deploys. So I can either maximum firepower, which would defeat him, or surprise strike him with Callus, which would defeat him. What I'm going to do here is I deploy the Seasoned Shore Trooper. The reason that I did this is the Seasoned Shore Trooper has +2 power at this time. So he is at strength 4. And I'm going to hopefully have the opportunity to attack with Tarkin and give an experience to the Shore Trooper, which would then mean that he would have 5 power and I could maximum firepower with with just Tarkin and the Trooper and do 7 damage to defeat Luke, even if he somehow deals with Callus. So there's the attack with Tarkin. After my opponent plays a Wing Leader to buff the Arc. Thankfully for me, the Wing Leader ended up being deployed after the Arc had already attacked. So now Luke deploys, and so I could maximum firepower him. I could just do the surprise strike. But either way, I'm pretty happy with this situation. I think I end up deciding to use the surprise strike because this way I'll have the maximum firepower kind of ready in reserve for a powerful unit my opponent deploys later. Something with a shield. I could use it to shoot down that experienced. I could use it to shoot down that experienced arc. My opponent plays Yoda, and I actually drew with Callus for defeating a unique unit. Um, and I drew a Thai LN, which I'm then going to play out. The Thai LN can potentially trade with my opponent's wing leader. There's a chance that my opponent will attack it with the restored arc to take out that arc. But if that is the play that my opponent goes for, it's a situation where I'm kind of fine with it because it would mean that the Thai had basically saved 4 damage from my base. So right now I'm feeling pretty good about this situation. I feel like my board is substantially stronger than that of my opponent. The ground arena is very far in my favor, and I have some good tricks. I have Relentless, hopefully going to deploy soon. And in the space arena, my opponent does have the advantage, but not by as much as I have the advantage in the ground arena. At least that's my assessment. Yoda trades with Callus. That does draw me a card. Draws him a card too. I have the Kai take out my opponent's wing leader, and we're going to see Jedi Luke deploys, and so 6/7 restore 3, and when played gives -3/-3, but it's -6/-6 because a unit jrod controlled was defeated, which means that it will immediately defeat that trooper. I'm going to deploy another trooper of the same type. My opponent hits me for 4, restores 1. I'm going to have Tarkin attack, given experience there, and then I'm going to use the maximum firepower to defeat that Luke with the 7 damage from Tarkin and the trooper. So overall, not the greatest turn for me. I feel like while I did get rid of the Yoda and the wing leader, Luke Skywalker was kind of expensive to deal with. My opponent still has the arc. I'm still taking some damage. I do have a much better ground arena still. And I do think that my overall board is substantially advantaged, but I do need to deal with that arc soon if I can because it's really whittling me down here. So J-Rod deploys, or he uses a Vanquish there to defeat that trooper. Um, so the Seasoned Shore Trooper taken down. I'm going to deploy a 7th Fleet Defender, which comes into play with a shield. So that can defeat this arc, but it would take 2 attacks to do so, which is pretty awkward, actually. The timing is just not very good. Sure. So I'm going to attack with Tarkin, putting a +1 counter or an experience there on the 7th Fleet Defender. If I can get another counter on the 7th Fleet Defender, it can defeat the arc in one shot. Might be my best opportunity for dealing with that arc. My opponent takes the initiative, and I'm going to deploy Bosk. No ambush, but just having Bosk on the board will help. I'm happy to see a Colonel Yularen here because I do think that some healing to my base might be very relevant. This turn I can also play the so I could potentially play Yularen plus Callus. I could potentially just play Relentless. There are definitely a bunch of options for me. My opponent plays Jedi Luke and gives the defender -3/-3, which does defeat it. Not something that I'm happy to see at all. Not something that I'm happy to see at all. So Jedi Luke is 6/7. I could attack him with Bosk and then also ambush him with Callus. The problem is that Bosk and Callus would die. I end up deciding that I'm going to play Relentless here and kind of try to take control of the game there. Um, so Relentless is an 8/8, and it makes it so that the opponent cannot. The first event they play each turn gets blanked. I end up just taking the initiative here. I'm hoping to draw an overwhelming barrage or something like that that will allow me to do a ton of damage. My opponent shields Luke with Luke leader ability. Not good for me. I have Relentless finally destroy that arc, but very late, and my base is very low life here. I have some okay units, but the base life totals are just really bad, and the shielded Luke is a problem. So I'm now actually not so confident in this situation. In fact, I feel like I'm losing here now. Luke takes down Bosk. I'm basically fine with this. Like, I mean, it's really bad, but like, I think it probably would have been worse for me if he just attacked the base. Could be wrong. Um, So the good thing about this though is I do have Colonel Yularen. So Colonel Yularen can heal my base, and then I can potentially bring out other units to do some damage here. So one thing that I could do is I could ambush Luke with Callus, and except now I can't because my opponent deploys Obi-Wan. This is a difficult situation for me. So Obi-Wan Kenobi is a Sentinel. I have 5 resources available. So I'm sorry, I said I had 5 resources available. I had selected 5 resources. I actually had more than that. I decide here that I'm gonna have to try and push through. Because my base is so low, I have to try and clear this stuff. Tarkin hits Tarkin hits Obi-Wan, gives an experience to Yularen. I ambush and kill Obi-Wan and draw a card. My opponent gives 2 experience to a unit, and if it's a force unit, you can draw a card. Gives it to the so he ends up giving that to the arc, which he then shields. This is a significant misplay by my opponent, I believe. Well, I don't know. I think that probably I would have just given it to Luke and attacked the base and put it at like very critical life. But the shielded arc is already going to survive 1 attack. So I think that would have worked better, but I'm not sure. Um, One funny thing about this is I actually thought Relentless was 9/9. Relentless is 8/8, so this arc can attack and defeat Relentless, which I did not realize. So there's a major major problem for me as well, though I'm not sure there's a ton I can do about it, quite frankly. Um, yeah, so the main thing here is I attack Luke there and give an experience to Yularen. So now I can use shoot first to defeat Luke. But the thing is, I could have actually given that experience to Relentless and kept it alive. But in this situation, life on my base is at such a premium that I might actually be fine with losing Relentless in exchange for not losing the game immediately. So maybe it's all to maybe it's all to the good. I ambush, or I don't ambush. I shoot first with Yularen to defeat Luke. And the problem now is that I do have some good units, but I need to get control of a very negative situation when it comes to I need to get control of a very negative situation when it comes to the space arena with another experienced arc. They're causing me some trouble. My opponent plays a Battlefield Marine. That's a new unit. It's a 2 cost 3/3 and just totally vanilla, but very efficient unit. One of the best things you can play in the early game. I ambush it with Bosk and defeat it, which I will happily take. My opponent plays a takedown to defeat Yularen. Don't like that. So that could have been played on Bosk also, but I think my opponent thought that Yularen had higher stats at that point, thanks to the experience, and additionally had the healing ability, which is kind of critical. So I play out my hand here with a Boba Disintegrator and another tie, but I'm not feeling great about this situation, and I draw a 7th Fleet Defender and another Bosk. Again, not what I want to see. Would really like to see some better removal here. One of the problems with this color combination is that green and yellow don't have good removal in the sense that green, like villain green, you do have Overwhelming Barrage, which is one of the best cards in the game. But the problem is that a lot of your removal is based on, so Barrage and Maximum Firepower are both based on already having units in play that are strong, and yellow doesn't have removal. So one of the interesting things about Cunning is that it does not have true removal basically at all. It has cards like Surprise Strike and Shoot First, but there's no uh there's no like true removal. There's a lot of disruption, but there's not removal. So, and when I say disruption, I mean cards like Waylay that returns the card to their hand, but they get to replay it. The various exhaust effect cards. These can disrupt the opponent's turn, but they don't actually Don't actually kill them. So this is actually, so my opponent actually does an illegal play here, but I don't realize it, I believe. So I think we see a shield put on that regional governor from Luke. That's not a legal play because the regional governor is not heroic. The governor played there named Overwhelming Barrage to block my best removal. Um, got a shield from Luke, which probably shouldn't have happened. The I play the ISB agent and reveal the no good to me dead to ping the shield off though, so I had a relatively straightforward counter to the shield. Um, but yeah, that was not really the way that that should have gone. Um, Probably doesn't end up mattering here though. Uh, and there was Luke's lightsaber on that governor as well. So he has two different units that can attack for 4, which is off by 1 from actually defeating my base, but can certainly do a lot of damage to my base, leaving me at 1 life, in fact. The good thing is I'm going to be able to play the no good to me dead on whichever unit doesn't immediately attack me, which will then at least hopefully keep me alive for the turn. But it's definitely a grim situation for me to be in. Yeah, so my opponent hits the base for 4 with the governor. I use no good to me dead to lock down the arc, and I deal 2 damage to the governor with Bosk. My opponent then uses Callus to trade with the Bosk that I already have in play. I use Tarkin's ability for an experience on that defender, which will allow it to take down the arc in 1 attack, but my opponent plays a Vanquish on it. I then play a second copy of Bosk and defeat the governor. The arc is still going to be shut down this turn by the no good to me dead, so it won't be able to attack. I attack with the tie, and we'll see how things continue. But overall, this is not a situation where I'm very happy because my base is so low. And I draw into an ISB agent and a surprise strike. My opponent plays R2. Um, so one thing I could do here is I could surprise strike R2 with the ISB agent, use Bosk to deal 2 damage to the restored arc. That might be my best play here. In that it would immediately get it would immediately get R2 off the field, and it would set me up to then give an experience to my tie and take down the arc with that combined attack. Instead, I give an experience to the Instead, I give an experience to the ISB agent, and my opponent puts a shield on R2. I don't know exactly what I was thinking here, but I think this is substantially worse than the I think this is substantially worse for me than it would have been to use the surprise. I don't know. I think I'm trying to avoid playing the surprise strike so that I have it in reserve if my opponent plays some other unit that's good or something. But I think that with the benefit of hindsight, at least the way that I played this was very awkward. I am able to play my other ISB agent and ping off the shield. I think my opponent passes here. I end up surprise striking over there and using the ping to deal 2 damage to R2, or not the ping, the Bosk ability. So now my experienced ISB agent can defeat R2 and Bosk can hit the base or something. But I'm also completely out of cards. My opponent it binds all things without a force unit to just repair R2, which then means that my ISB agent can't deal with it in 1 attack. Um, I think what I do here is I have the ISB agent attack the base instead. It's an interesting scenario. My board is way better than that of my opponent, but I'm on 1 life, so this R2 is actually something that I have to deal with despite being a, weak 1 drop unit. It's just there's very little that I can afford to have on the board from the opposition. 2 damage to the base. I think my opponent passes and I take the initiative here, rather than attacking with Bosk. So right now, so I draw a No Good to Me Dead and a Super Laser Technician, which is really not what I want to see. End up attacking into R2 with Bosk. Not a trade that I want to make, but don't have a lot else. My opponent plays Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is a big problem for me. I'm going to buff my ISB agent again, so I can now have this ISB agent hit Obi-Wan and live. Then I could potentially attack Obi-Wan with the other small units, use the No Good to Me Dead. My opponent, however, plays Kanan, and there's really not a lot I can do now. There's two different enemy units that are a big problem. I attack there. My opponent takes the initiative, and that is game. I can exhaust one of those with the No Good to Me Dead, but the other one can just attack and destroy my base. So we're gonna go to the next game here. We do some sideboarding. So one thing that I was noticing is I felt like in the end game I was drawing a bunch of small units that I didn't want. I felt like Waylay would be really useful against this deck. It's very good against attachments. It's good against Luke. It's because Luke has shields. It could get a lot of value there. It's good against Obi-Wan. So I want to put in my Waylays, and I want to. So I've decided here that I'm going to bring in my copies of Devastator and try and set up a potential, like kind of an end game situation. Um, so I'm sideboarding here because my opponent has those powerful big units, like the Jedi Luke and the home one, though we did not see home one. I want to get Devastator to be kind of the trump card there and have a bigger unit to try to close out the game and stabilize those end games. I'm actually removing Boba Disintegrator. So Boba Disintegrator is a really good card, but actually doesn't fit into this deck very well. First off, there's no Energy Conversion Lab, which is a card that makes him work way better. Um, Second off, he's not Imperial, so he doesn't work with Tarkin or some of the other synergy stuff. I think that even though Boba Disintegrator is really good, he's not so crazily good that you want him in every deck. And indeed, this deck that I'm playing right now is not one where I think he's going to do well. So this is a pretty decent starting hand. I can lead off with ISB. I can lead off with the Shore Trooper. I have turn two. I can go into the Super Laser Tech, or I could play the Seventh Fleet Defender. I have a Surprise Strike, which could hopefully allow me to ambush Luke. The Relentless in hand is a strong late game unit. A lot of options available. I end up deciding, okay, I'm going to resource the ISB agent. ISB agent is better in an opening hand when you're going first. When you're going second, he's not as good because your opponent might not have deployed a unit for you to ping. And the question is, what other unit do I want to resource? So thinking about this turn, I'm going to lead off. Yeah, I decided to resource the defender, and my reasoning is I want to play the shore trooper on the first turn, and then go straight into the super laser technician. And by doing that, we're going to create a situation where I can hopefully ramp up to Tarkin on the next turn. And because the super laser technician is something that I want to be deploying rather than the because the super laser technician is something that I want to be deploying rather than the seventh fleet defender, I decide to resource it even though it's a good card, just because it doesn't necessarily fit into the way that I want to take these turns. Now, it's possible that I should have actually resourced Relentless instead here and kept the seventh fleet defender just because Relentless isn't going to be relevant until much later in the game. There's a good chance that I might draw my other Relentless or a Devastator or whatever by that time. And the Seventh Fleet Defender might be a good card to play, even if not on turn two. It could be a good card to play later in the game. It doesn't really go obsolete as much as some of the early fighters do because the shield prevents it from being killed easily by things like Millennium Falcon, Aztec Liberator gunship, stuff like that. Um, all of those cards aren't relevant here. In general, a lot of the early game fighters start to struggle later on because of units like Aztec Liberator gunship, Imperial Interceptor, and Millennium Falcon. I play the Seasoned Shore Trooper here, lead us off, 2 cost 2/3, very cool art. and +2 power if you have 6 or more resources. But no, and my opponent actually misses the turn one play, which I am happy to see here. But as I was saying, um, the the Seventh Fleet Defender doesn't go obsolete in the same way that some other early fighters do, because the shield token means that it's protected from some of those effects. My opponent plays an Alliance Marine here, and I find myself a little sad that I don't have that shoot first that I just resourced. But overall, I am happy deploy the uh, to deploy the technician here and start setting up for a later game play. Um, I draw a Tie LN and Veers, so I'm going to resource the Tie LN. Again, I think it probably would have been better. I think it would have been better to resource Relentless here, actually, rather than the Tie LN, because then I could play. If we assume that I have 5 resources here because the Super Laser Technician probably dies, I then have enough resources for Veer's, Tile, and use Tarkin's ability. Whereas right now, I'm probably not going to be able to get maximum value out of my resources. Okay, opponent has the initiative. Let's see how this goes. Shielded Marine easily takes out my Shore Trooper there. So one thing I can do here is I could use Tarkin's ability to give an experience uh, to my Super Laser Technician and then use it to trade. But instead, I'm going to play Veers. Because Veers gives all my Imperial units +1/+1, he makes it so that the Super Laser Tech is in trading position anyway. My opponent ambushes the Super Laser Technician with the Energy Conversion Lab using Yoda. So Yoda takes 3 damage but remains alive and heals the base from the 2 damage that was inflicted by my Seasoned Shore Trooper. I'm going to use Tarkin's ability for 1 experience to Veers. My opponent shields Yoda. I'm then going to deploy Tarkin, and I have Tarkin attack the Marine. Tarkin is himself a 3/8 right now because he gets the +1/+1 from Veers for being an Imperial. So that means that Tarkin can take out the Marine and give an experience to Veers. Veers now a 5/5, and I have a maximum firepower in hand, so I am in position to defeat Luke if he deploys with a resupply this turn, assuming no other shenanigans. Yoda's still there with a shield, which is a little annoying for me, but I'm going to be able to ping off the shield using that ISB agent. Happy to have these ISB agents against a deck with all these shields. My opponent plays a takedown to defeat Veers, though, which I'm very unhappy to see. Losing the 5/5 Veers there is really not what I want to do. I deploy the ISB agent and reveal a surprise strike, ping the shield off of Yoda. Yoda attacks and I think he's just attacking the base here. Yeah, just attacking the base here. And I'm going to have Tarkin attack, defeat Yoda, take 2 more damage, put a resource on the ISB agent. I believe my opponent takes the initiative, and I unfortunately end up passing here. This is a weak turn for sure, because I do not end up being able to resource anything, which is really, really not what I want. Um, Draw into a Devastator here. So that's again, I have a awkward hand here because I have kind of late game stuff, but I don't have stuff that's that great immediately. I end up resourcing the maximum firepower because I'm not going to be able to get big value out of it. I have Tarkin attack Luke here, so my goal is to set up a potential kill. With Tarkin attacking Luke, Luke will go down to 5 life. I can then potentially kill him with a surprise strike from the IFC agent. I think that's better than attacking the base because if I attack the base, I am not in position for the kill. Unfortunately, my opponent has Luke's lightsaber, which heals Luke from the 2 damage and adds a shield. So that is very negative for me. Could be worse. Could definitely be worse, but still not something I like to see. I have the ISB agent hit the base for 3 damage there. My opponent spends 4, brings out Palace, and or I'm sorry, brings out Kanan. And my hand here is incredibly awkward. So I could ambush with Callus, but Callus would then just be killed by Luke. Callus also can't kill Kanan in one attack. I could jet a City Kanan and then ambush him with Callus, which would put 4 damage on Callus. But again, Luke could just kill him. Luke, if he attacks, can shield Kanan. I'm really in a very bad position here. My main hope is to survive long enough that I can get those big endgame ships out and try and close things out. I think I actually take the initiative here because my hand just doesn't have options that I'm happy about. My opponent hits my base for 7 with the lightsabered Luke and puts an experience on Callus. Now, I do draw a No Good to Me Dead, which is going to be really helpful here, but the rest of my hand is still not, it's just not what I want to see. I'm trying to just get to those big ships, and maybe if I can get to the big ships, they're going to be able to put me into a favorable position in this game. But right now, I consider myself very far behind. I am behind on life. I am ramped above my opponent, but only by 1 resource. And my opponent has 2 very powerful units on the board, whereas I only have this ISB agent. So no good to me dead, going to exhaust Luke for 2 turns. Hopefully that will buy me enough time, but not sure it will. My opponent plays a Jedi lightsaber on Callus, which is a huge problem for me. This is where having one of those waylays would be excellent, being able to waylay Callus here and defeat the Jedi lightsaber and remove the shield would be a major setback for my opponent, but unfortunately is not something that I can really do here. So with my remaining resources, I could deploy Callus, but Callus is really not going to get that much value. It might be useful to deploy him anyway, though, in the effort of just so I have the ISB agent just take the shield off of Kanan. Callus can deploy here and just be a unit on the field. My opponent hits my base for 7, mills a card, restores 1 to his own base. I decide that I have to just deploy Callus just to be a unit. Maybe he'll absorb an attack, in which case he'll save my base from major damage, but I am in desperate straits here with the base this low. Opponent takes the initiative, not a lot I can do. We're just going to go to the next turn. Super laser tech, which I don't want. I will be able to play Relentless here, but it is probably too late. So we will see how this goes. So my opponent uses Callus or uses Kanan to defeat Callus, taking only 2 damage because the Jedi lightsaber gives Callus -2/-2. Very negative position for me. But I probably prefer that to having the damage on the base. I guess if you attack the base, yeah, if I surprise strike him, he still doesn't actually die, so I would have to use Tarkin on Callus and then surprise strike. I deploy Relentless, but my opponent deploys Home 1. I'm going to take the initiative. So on the plus side, I do have Relentless out, and I've reached 10 resources, which means that I can deploy Devastator. So if I deploy Devastator, I can deal 10 damage to defeat Callus immediately. My opponent will still, of course, have Luke, but then so 10 damage, Sentinel and Overwhelm defeats Callus. Um, my opponent tries to just attack my base with Home 1, but it's not legal because that is a Sentinel. So Devastator holding the line in space against Home 1. We have a war of the capital ships over here, which is pretty odd. Not what you always see in this game. My opponent swings in with Luke, puts a shield on Home 1. I'm going to use my base is on 2 life, so I'm going to use my base to I use Jeddah City to blank out Obi-Wan's attack or Yoda's attack, so he can't attack and kill my base. But my opponent plays a it binds all things, which gets blanked by Relentless. I have Relentless attack the enemy base for 8, but my opponent then has a Vanquish to play on Devastator, defeating it and opening things up for home one to attack and win the game. So that's going to be game. We did play a third game of this, and Tarkin lost that one too. So ultimately went 0-3 for this set. I'm not going to actually broadcast the third game here because this video is already getting pretty long. But the ultimately, I felt that in this situation, even though my like very late game is notionally better with the really big ships, I felt that the Tarkin deck was at a big disadvantage in the mid game, and it was ultimately kind of insurmountable. Actually, these games have made me kind of rethink my approach to Tarkin. I'm not sure that having all the ramp stuff and big late game ships is a good route for him. That seems like something that works better with a leader like Vader, where you want to play multiple ramp pieces. Um, Super Laser Tech also isn't as good for Tarkin as in some other decks because you don't have the energy conversion lab unless you're going double green. Ultimately, I think that I'm going to need to restructure my Tarkin build and play for more of like an early and mid game situation, maybe trying to get more advantage from his ability and so on, rather than trying to kind of mix and match the early game, some of the earlier game stuff and like tempo things from yellow with the very late game stuff from the big green ships. I think the current one doesn't really have a super clear timing that's great for it and is a little all over the place. So I'm going to try and make a more early game Tarkin build and see if that does any better. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thanks to you all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.